Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everybody. We've got a great show for you today. And, in the past, we have done our favorite films of the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, and then we stopped because most people think that beyond the 60s isn't really classic cinema. Well, we disagree.
Well, and many critics do as well. They call the 70s the golden age of cinema.
And I totally agree because, the 70s, it was a decade that saw the rise of the auteur.
Yeah.
And it's when the studio system was dying away and these great filmmakers like Martin Scorsese and Coppola and Cassavetes and DePalma, they were hitting their stride and they brought to the screen very specific vision.
Yep.
And it's the time that you really start seeing auteurs,
Yes.
the definition of the word.
Yeah.
It was a very experimental era, which I really loved. And I think boundaries were pushed. And I think subjects that were once taboo were being addressed and explored, which was exciting. And it really became this creative high point for cinema. And it's one of my favorite eras in filmmaking. So Nan and I are going to talk about some of our favorite films of the 1970s.
And I think one of the reasons why all that you said about the decade, it feels also like a response to what was happening in the culture.
Absolutely.
Having gone through so many assassinations in the 60s, and then Watergate, and of course the Vietnam War in the 70s, and this whole different palette of filmmaking.
Yeah, and I think there's a cynicism that creeps into 70s cinema,
For sure.
which isn't necessarily a bad thing because it does let us look at things that aren't so nice, that we should have.
Who doesn't like a nice dollop of cynicism? Not a cup. You don't want a cup of cynicism, but maybe a dollop, right? So, Steve, do you want to go first?
I would love to because there's one movie from the 1970s which I am obsessed with.
Oh, I can't wait to
and
hear
it's
it.
not that well known, and it is from 1975, and it's the movie Smile.
Oh, I've never seen it.
You are in for a treat. It's this underrated, undiscovered gem of a movie. Actually, Leonard Maltin called it one of the best unsung films of the 1970s. It's this social satire that takes a swing at everything. It takes a swing at beauty pageants and small town life and ceremonies that we embrace to make us feel better about our mediocre lives. But what I love most about Smile is that it pokes fun of these things without ever being condescending or really cruel to the subjects of the satire. It's done in such a funny and endearing way. And after watching what's happened to the Miss America pageant, which has become this debacle, where now you have to do a science experiment on stage in heels to prove that you're a genius. What happened to the days when, a pretty girl with a little charm could compete and win a car and some scholarship money? I miss that.
I can't even breathe. I'm laughing so hard.
Well, it's true.
It's the heels, isn't it?
It's the vision of the science experiment.
Well, it really happened. You know that really happened.
No, I didn't know.
The girl who won got on stage and did I think a science experiment that we did in 7th grade. And that was her talent, and she won. Kind of going back to Smile, though, there's one contestant in the movie. She's Miss Anaheim. Her name is Doria, and she's played by the brilliant Annette O'Toole.
Oh, we love her.
In her feature film debut. And she has this great line that she says to her roommate. She says, "Boys get money and scholarships for making a lot of touchdowns. Why shouldn't girls get them for being cute and charming?" She had a good point.
She did, I guess, yeah.
Well, the film was directed by the great Michael Ritchie, who had just come off the success of The Candidate from 1972 with Robert Redford.
Such a good film.
That was written by the screenwriter Jerry Belson. It surrounds the young American Miss Beauty pageant in Santa Rosa, California. And Michael Ritchie got the idea for the film after he was asked to judge a beauty pageant in Santa Rosa in real life.
Interesting.
And he was just shocked at how seriously seriously everyone took this pageant. I mean, it was life or death stakes to these girls and these people that put it on.
And scholarship money, that would be a real reason to be so passionate about wanting to win.
Absolutely. I have a dear, dear friend, Reggie Athnos, who was a former Miss Tennessee, and she talks a lot about pageants get a lot of crap. And she said, but it's a great opportunity for young women to get money for school. I think there's something to be said for that. So Smile certainly takes a stab at all of this, which is really great. The film actually opens up with this small town beauty pageant contestant, Miss Imperial Valley, Connie, played by Colleen Camp, the great Colleen Camp. And she's on stage in front of an audience performing her talent. And what is her talent? Packing a suitcase.
I got to say, that is a talent.
That is a talent.
Yeah.
Well, apparently it was the only talent she had where she didn't fall off stage, as one of the judges said. But she was cute and they wanted her to win, so they had her pack a suitcase and boom, she wins. Well, she gets to go to the national pageant in Santa Rosa, where the head judge of the pageant, Big Bob Freelander, love the name, played by Bruce Dern.
Yes.
In a really a rare good guy role for a change. He plays this used car salesman whose bravado and quickness to spout out these inspirational sayings is sort of a mechanism to make him feel better about his, as I said before, his pretty mediocre life. Well, the executive director of the pageant is Brenda DiCarlo, and it is played to icy perfection by Barbara Feldon, who we all know and love as Agent 99 from Get Smart.
Yes.
Well, Brenda is an ex-beauty queen herself, and she takes this pageant very, very seriously. And this can't be said, though, of her husband, Andy, played by Nicholas Pryor, a great character actor who we lost last year. Well, he plays this unhappy alcoholic who runs a trophy shop, and he's drowning in the smallness of his life. And that really comes to fruition later on. Well, as the girls arrive for the pageant, we get to meet our protagonist, Miss Antelope Valley, Robin Gibson, played by Joan Prather. She would go on to play Janet on 8 is Enough. You may remember her. Her character is raised by a single mother, and she's this hardworking straight-A student who is a pageant novice. And frankly, she's kind of amused by it all. She doesn't take it that seriously, which is rare.
Yeah.
Well, her roommate is Annette O'Toole's character, Miss Anaheim, and she is a seasoned pro who shocks Robin by telling her the story about this dermatologist who rented a hotel room in Anaheim and held his own beauty pageant. Shocked, Robin asks, "Didn't you feel bad?" And Doria quipped back, "No, I won $200 and had a mole removed." Which I think is hilarious. So there's another contestant that we should keep an eye on, and this is Miss Salinas, Maria Gonzalez, played by, and this is truly a scene-stealing performance. It's played by Maria O'Brien, who's the real-life daughter of classic film stars Edmund O'Brien and Olga San Juan.
Really?
Yeah, and she's so good in this. She is the pageant's first Latina contestant, and she is insincere, and she is so obsequious to Brenda, and she's a total bitch to all the other contestants. But the best part is she uses her Latina culture and her poor little minority girl status to,
in quotes,
to brown nose her way through the ranks. I mean, she's always making guacamole from her home country to feed the judges. And
this is so inappropriate.
It's horrible, but anyway, it's very funny. Well, as the pageant gets underway, the JCs who sponsor the show hire this once famous, jaded Hollywood choreographer, Tommy French, who's played in real life by this once famous, jaded choreographer, Michael Kidd.
Oh, wow. Michael Kidd?
Yeah, and many people say that this performance is a little semi-autobiographical for him. But he's genius. He's so good. Well, he's there to whip the contestants into shape, and he totally clashes with the head of the JCs, Wilson Shears, played by the very funny Jeffrey Lewis, who is actually the father of Juliette Lewis, and he pushes the girls so hard that one of them collapses, they burst into tears, one girl falls off stage, but possibly to gain attention and get noticed. The competition heats up, and the head judge, Big Bob, Bruce Dern, he's got to deal with this embarrassment of his son, Little Bob, which I love he calls him Little Bob, who's played by Eric Shea, we all remember as the kid from the Poseidon Adventure. Well, Little Bob has brought shame to the pageant. pageant because he and two of his buddies have been caught taking photos of the girls undressing
Yes.
and trying to sell
Those
them.
little Polaroids.
I know. He was an entrepreneur. What can I say?
Yes.
Going back to Brenda DiCarlo, her family home is in shambles. She and her husband are fighting. There's just a whole lot going on with these people. Playing some of the other contestants were some faces that we now know quite well today. We've got Melanie Griffith, who would soon be a star in her own right. And then we've got Denise Nickerson plays one of the girls. And she, people may realize, she played Violet in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Well, she's all grown up now and she's very funny. And then we've got Caroline Williams, who went on to play Stretch in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. A lot of great supporting people in this. And the other girls who are cast as the girls in the pageant, they were actually real life beauty pageant contestants. They were non-professionals.
Okay.
They were just girls in a pageant.
Doing their thing.
Which kind of adds this weird authenticity to it because you can tell they're not actresses.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a mock documentary satire comedy.
Yes, I think that's really well said. My favorite part, though, is when they get to the climax and they crown the queen. We've been following all these girls, Joan Prather and Annette O'Toole and Melanie Griffith and Denise Nickerson. Well, the winner is a girl that we've never met, has never had a line of dialogue, and she's just a little blip on our radar, which they purposely did that in the screenplay because they wanted to show the absolute randomness of beauty pageants.
Right.
It
Sounds like watching a murder mystery, and they come up with the murder, and it's like you didn't even have that character in here from the beginning. Like, how were we ever supposed to guess it was him or her?
I know, and I think a lot of people might feel a little cheated because the girls they've invested in, none of them win.
Okay.
So, but it's part of what makes it
the
such
story.
a great satire.
Yeah.
It received great reviews, but it tanked the box office. People were not ready for this movie and did not get the satire, I don't think. It was later turned into a Broadway musical in 1986 with music by Marvin Hamlish. It closed after 48 performances.
I wonder if somebody redid that now. Although even now, pageants aren't really around.
I know,
so.
and pageants are dying breed
Yes.
things, so it may not be as relevant.
Radio and pageants. Yeah.
Well, it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Because, movies like Drop Dead Gorgeous and Little Miss Sunshine, they owe a debt of gratitude to Smile.
Yeah.
For sure.
Great choice. I can't wait to watch it.
So good.
My first choice for favorite 70s films is Klute from 1971.
Oh, great choice. I almost chose it myself.
I love this film. Directed by Alan J. Pakula, written by Andy Lewis and David E. Lewis. This film was the start of director Pakula's Paranoia trilogy. So it's comprised of Klute, 71, The Parallax View, 74, which we talked about on episode 59, about political films, and then All the President's Men in 1976, about the Watergate scandal. Pakula actually started his career as a producer, perhaps most famously as the producer of To Kill a Mockingbird. He actually called Harper Lee's agent and asked to get the rights, and she met him and fell in love with him and really liked him, and he got the rights.
Yeah.
He also became known as an actor's director, beginning with the first film he directed, The Sterile Cuckoo, 1969. Liza Minnelli received her first Academy Award nomination, and he also directed Meryl Streep in her Academy Award-winning performance in Sophie's Choice, 1982. So he's kind of right up there as one of my favorite directors, at least in the more modern era. The story is that John Klute, played by Donald Sutherland, is a private detective who's hired to find his friend, this missing businessman named Tom Gruneman. Klute's investigation leaves him to Bree Daniels, played by Jane Fonda. She's a struggling actress who's working as a call girl, and she reluctantly decides to help him with the investigation. The two of them, their relationship, it's just this very layered and complicated thing as the investigation evolves.
So cat and mouse, the two of them.
Very cat and mouse. The key to finding Tom Gruneman seems to lie in locating a John who likes to beat up call girls.
Nice.
Yeah, one of those guys, and maybe even murder them. So the question is, can they locate who this person is, and is it Tom Gruneman before the creep gets to Bree? This film was only nominated for one Academy Award.
Which is shocking, by the way.
It really is when you look at it. And that was for Jane Fonda for Best Actress, and she actually won her first Oscar.
I'm going to say it because I say it every time. Criminal that Donald Sutherland was not nominated.
Criminal. And John DeLeo and will say the same.
John will agree.
Yes. He wrote a fabulous book that we had an episode about a few weeks ago. Fonda thought she was wrong for the role initially. She's quoted as saying, "I was just beginning to understand feminism and the women's movement, and as a feminist, she was concerned about playing a prostitute. But a dear friend of hers read the script and said, the script gives you a chance to go deep. And if you can go deep into any human being, That is feminism because it allows you to show an entire human being.
Oh, wow.
Which I love that quote.
I love that too.
5 months prior to doing Klute, she still had that blonde, long hair from Barbarella. And she asked her then husband, Roger Vadim, for the name of his barber in the village. She wanted to get rid of her hair. So she went to Paul McGregor, the barber, and said, do something. He cut and colored her hair. And that's the Klute haircut she had way before she started.
Shag hairdo,
Yes, that everybody wanted to get in the 1970s. So she had that before she was even doing the film.
My
it wasn't
mom
part
had
of that
hairdo.
Oh, it's such a great hair. I think it's still great now. Fonda, as many people know, was a student of Lee Strasberg in the Actors Studio, so preparation and that method acting was very important to her. She spent a week with call girls and madams and pimps, but part of the reason she didn't think she was right for the role was she was in these real after-hours clubs, and nobody even winked at her. So she felt like, how would I be believable in this role? And she recommended Faye Dunaway for the part.
Oh, how funny.
But Pakula would not have it. He knew that she was the right person. Continuing in the ways of method acting, the apartment that her character lives in was actually a functioning apartment built in the studio, and Fonda lived in it, like slept overnight there.
Oh, while filming? Oh,
yes,
wow.
and had a lot to do with the choices of design and what was in the apartment. And
that is commitment.
it's very much commitment. Klute is a thriller and
such a thriller.
and a mystery, but it's also this amazing story of this relationship between Fonda and Sutherland. Donald Sutherland as the title character, as you alluded to, he's just fantastic in this role. So much moving across his face. And yet, if it's possible, there's still this stillness to his work, a containment in everything he does that fits so well with the character, but says so much about who he is. He's got this really quiet strength. Of course, it's Fonda's movie. She's mesmerizing. She's able to play this role of Bree with a combination of edge, cynicism, little dollop, maybe a little more than that in this one, power, but she also has this incredible vulnerability.
Yes.
And of course, sexuality.
Oh, and I love that she takes control of her sexuality and she has power in that.
She does. A lot of the scenes have an almost improvisational aspect to them, and I think there might have been some of that in creating the film. In the original script, the psychiatrist that Bree sees was written as a male psychiatrist. Fonda felt it had to be a woman, that the character of Bree Daniels wouldn't be vulnerable with a male psychiatrist, which I thought, bingo.
Good point.
Yeah. So Pakula agreed to that. It was changed. The psychiatrist played by Vivian Nathan. Those scenes are just riveting. And I just want to play a little clip from one of those right now. This is how she describes to the psychiatrist why she continues to work as a call girl.
What's the difference between going out on a call as a model or as an actress, as a call girl? You're successful as a call girl. You're not
Because when you're a call girl, you control it. That's why. Because someone wants you, not me. I mean, there are some Johns that I have regularly that want me, and that's terrific. But they want a woman, and I know I'm good, and I arrive at their hotel or their apartment, and they're usually nervous, which is fine because I'm not. I know what I'm doing. And for an hour, I'm the best actress in the world and the best in the world. And
why'd you say you're the best actress in the world at that time?
Because it's an act. That's what's nice about it. You don't have to feel anything. You don't have to care about anything. You don't have to like anybody. You just lead them by the ring in their nose in the direction that they think they want to go in. And you get a lot of money out of them in as short a period of time as possible. And you control it and you call the shots. And I always feel just great afterwards.
You can find that clip on YouTube, and the improvisational aspect of her acting in that scene is just...
so powerful.
Yeah, really powerful. She was interviewed about the film, and she talks about a scene toward the end of the movie with Charles Cioffi, who plays Peter Cable. It's really the climax of the film, where he divulges to her some things he really shouldn't have done.
Oh, yeah. Bad boy.
Now, Fonda is quoted in terms of her process as an actor as saying she didn't plan anything for the scene. She didn't come in with a preconceived idea of, okay, I'm going to move here, I'm going to cry here, I'm going to do whatever here. She just went into it thinking, I'm just going to listen to him. She doesn't have any lines, but what she does in this scene, and the camera stays on her the whole time.
Yeah, the whole time, yep.
But you don't even see her eyes. This is what's so amazing about her work and about Pakula is you don't see her eyes, but you know everything that's happening to her, and it is just an extraordinary moment in the film.
One of the finest pieces of acting without uttering a word I've ever seen.
Yes, I agree. The film also stars Roy Scheider as her former pimp, and look for a young Veronica Hamill from Hill Street Blues in her screen debut, who actually looks a lot like Bridget Moynihan.
Oh, she does.
Oh my gosh. As well as Gene Stapleton in a small supporting role.
Right.
One more thing I just need to add about this film is the score by Michael Small. It adds so much. It gives you goosebumps.
Such tension.
Yeah, and in a different way than most thrillers do. And it was considered at the time groundbreaking, and many of the other thrillers of the 70s kind of followed suit. And he actually scored many of them, including The Parallax View and Marathon Man.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I just want to mention that Alan J. Pakula died in a tragic and rather freakish car accident in 1998 at just 70 years of age, which nowadays, people, 70 is the new 50.
That's young.
Yeah, and I just think of all the films that he could have done and shared. And
I know. What a loss.
Yeah, huge loss. I think it's time for this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
So our pop question of the day, of course, deals with 1970s movies we love. And the movie is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The question is, who was originally announced in 1962 to be the star of the movie? But of course, it took 13 years to develop, and they ended up not doing the movie. Who was the actor?
Great question. We'll be right back with the answer to that and more 1970s films after this.
Okay, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. On the subject of 1970s movies, our tour stop today is about another 70s classic film, 1977's Jaws. The USS Indianapolis speech delivered by the legendary Robert Shaw is regarded as one of the best monologues in Hollywood history. But the debate over just who wrote that monologue is kind of in murky water. The film, you remember, was directed by a very young Steven Spielberg. Robert Shaw's Quint reveals to Martin Brody and Matt Hooper, played by Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss, that he's one of the 316 survivors of the actual World War II USS Indianapolis disaster. That's the ship that sank in July of 1945 after being torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. Well, there seems to be no debate that it was the late Howard Sackler who came up with the idea for that Indianapolis speech. Spielberg recognized that if the speech was done right, it could be an extraordinary glimpse into Quint, because it explains his hatred for sharks, his choice of a career, and also some of his behavior hinting at PTSD. Spielberg says he asked noted scriptwriter John Milius, who polished some of the dialogue in the film, to take a crack at it. Milius is said to have dictated the speech over the phone, resulting in a 10-page script of its own. Well, Spielberg gave those pages to Shaw, who took the beast of a speech and cut it in half. Spielberg later said it's Milius's words and Robert Shaw's editing. And now back to Steve and Nan from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. We normally at this point in the show shout out a listener of the week, but we wanted to give a shout out to all of the listeners that wrote us asking if we were okay during the fires here in Los Angeles. Thank you so much. It has been a heartbreaking and devastating time, but your care and love and just your thinking of us was so incredibly thoughtful. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was so heartwarming to see all of your emails, like the concern for us. And so thank you so much. We really appreciate your love and concern.
Yes. Steve, what's your next film?
My next film, it's from 1973, and it's Badlands by Terrance Malick.
Love it.
I know. I love this movie so much. There's this mesmerizing quality about Badlands that just stays with you for a long time. Mm-hmm. There's no other way to say it. It's got this lyrical easiness that sort of belies the violence to come.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting to see it play out. The cinematography is haunting. It helps create this moody narrative that's unforgettable. And the film unfolds slowly, and it travels in this trajectory that always keeps the viewer guessing. Nobody really knows what's about to happen. It has this quality that's just seems so authentic and never pretentious. It was written and directed with such assurance that it's hard to believe that this was the film debut of Terrance Malick.
Oh, wow. I'd forgotten that.
Who was a protege of Arthur Penn. I don't know if a lot of people knew that. And he was just a few years out of the American Film Institute when he wrote and directed Badlands. A lot of people think that Malick tends to be a little self-indulgent. I love the care and attention to detail he shows. I think Badlands is probably one of his finest cinematic achievements. The movie's set in 1959 in South Dakota. It's about a 15-year-old high school girl named Holly, played by Sissy Spacek in a role that literally launched her career. You know, Holly lives in a small town with her widowed father, played by Warren Oates, and he's a sign painter with whom she has a very complicated relationship. Well, Holly's living this dull existence until she meets Kit Carruthers, played by the remarkable Martin Sheen.
Heart be still, Martin Sheen. How much I love him.
So good in this. And he's this 25-year-old sanitation worker who's also a Korean War vet. Well, Kit begins to date Holly against her father's wishes. They quickly fall in love. They start this very dangerous, kind of codependent relationship. Well, after Holly's father, and spoiler alert here, and it's hard to watch, but after Holly's father kills her dog as punishment for her dating Kit, Kit comes to the house and does what any good boyfriend would do. He kills him.
Oh, dear.
Then the couple decides to fake their own suicides, so they burn the house down, thinking people will assume that they're dead also.
Right.
Well, they then hit the road together, and their destination is the Badlands, because the Badlands to them represents freedom.
Okay.
And it becomes this metaphor for freedom for them. For a time, they live happily hidden in the woods in this tree house they created, almost like their own little utopia. But eventually 3 bounty hunters show up because there's now a bounty on their head. Kit kills them. They continue their rampage. They go on this killing spree, and they go on this chase from the police that's unbelievable. You have to see this chase. So good. It was the closing night film of the 1973 New York Film Festival, and it received great critical acclaim. However, the film was a colossal bomb at the box office.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Too dark?
Yeah, I think it was too dark. I don't think people were ready for it. And it was based on the true life crime spree of 18-year-old Charles Starkweather, known as the Mad Dog Killer, and his 13-year-old girlfriend, Carol Fugit. And by the time this pair were caught, they had killed 11 people, including Carol's parents and her younger sister. So Kit and Holly were also following suit. You look at the tagline for this movie, and it's an interesting one. And it is, in 1959, a lot of people were killing time. Kit and Holly were killing people.
I don't think that's a good log line to get people to come and see the movie.
Maybe that's why it was a colossal bomb at the box office.
Maybe it was not marketed right.
Well, the movie and the tagline actually motivated the Zodiac Killer, our very own Zodiac Killer, who had not been heard from in many, many years. It inspired him to write a letter to a newspaper denouncing the flippant attitude the film had about violence in society, which is kind of ironic, don't you think?
Wow.
Yeah, it's really crazy. There's some really fun cameos in Badlands. You can look for Martin Sheen's 2 sons, Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez, as these 2 boys under a lamppost.
Forgot about that.
And Malick himself makes a cameo as the architect who shows up at the wealthy man's house and is intercepted by Kit in an interesting way. Another fun fact, it was on the set of Badlands where Sissy Spacek met her future husband, Jack Fisk, who was the film's art director.
Wow.
And they are still married to this day. Iconic, classic Badlands. Go see it.
Love it. All right. The next one for me is The Sting, 1972.
Another great choice.
Well, I know everybody's probably seen this, but I just couldn't not put it on my list. This is directed by George Roy Hill, written by David S. Ward. It's set in Chicago in the 1930s. It's about 2 grifters, Henry Gondorf, played by Paul Newman, and Johnny Hooker, played by Robert Redford. I have to sing their names because they're so good looking.
They inspire song.
They do inspire song. They both attempt to pull off the ultimate con job on Irish crime boss Doyle Lonigan, played brilliantly by Robert Shaw. And it's all to avenge the death of their friend Luther Coleman, played by Robert Earl Jones. And yes, that is James Earl Jones's father. So this film was nominated for a whopping 10 Academy Awards. It won 7, including Best Director, Screenplay, Film Editing, Art Direction, Costume Design by Edith Head, her 8th Oscar after having been nominated 35 times total. Best Music and Score by Marvin Hamlish, who, by the way, that night won 3 Oscars, 1 for The Sting and 2 for The Way We Were.
Oh, wow.
And then, of course, The Sting won Best Picture, garnering Julia Phillips Phillips the distinction of being the first female producer to win an Academy Award with Tony Bill and Michael Phillips.
I had a very interesting Thanksgiving dinner with Julia Phillips one time.
Oh my gosh.
That is for another time.
That might be a whole episode right there.
I found her fascinating.
Oh, I bet. This film has one of the most peerless supporting casts ever.
Yes.
Charles Durning, Eileen Brennan, Ray Walston, Harold Gould, Dana Elkhart, Jack Kehoe, and Demetra Arliss. I mean,
such a great supporting
their
cast.
Faces, they're just amazing. And we don't get to talk a lot about casting directors, but this was cast by Marion Doherty.
The great Marion Doherty.
And you're right. She should always have great before her name.
And there's a great documentary about her.
Yes.
If no one's seen it, it's so good.
Yes. The film reunited George Roy Hill with Newman and Redford, having done, of course, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. George Roy Hill was very specific about the palette of this world that he was creating. He wanted it to have that Saturday Evening Post feel, which is what was used for the cards in between each scene to kind of billboard what was coming up next. So if you compare this color palette in this film to Klute, or the next film I'm going to talk about, it's just such a lesson in how color can help tell the story, set the mood and the period. Brilliantly done.
So true.
In this film. Robert Shaw plays such a wonderful villain. He actually injured his knee prior to filming, and he incorporated this limp that he has into his performance. According to Julia Phillips's book, You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again, Shaw had split all the ligaments in his knee after slipping on a wet handball court at the Beverly Hills Hotel a week before filming started. And so he had to wear a leg brace during production, which was kept hidden by his 1930s style trousers that he wore. This picture, though, is really about, as I sang their names, Newman and Redford. It's their picture. The charisma, the twinkle in their eyes, the ease between them.
Such chemistry.
Oh, it's chemistry. It's the definition of it,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
The two of them together, it's just this palpable love fest. I don't know how else to describe it, but who doesn't want to root for these two grifters?
Yes.
You just want them to succeed. I know that this film has probably been seen by most of you out there listening, but I had to include it because for me, it's one of those films that's nearly perfect in my mind for the genre. When I first saw it, it kept continually surprising me. I don't want to give anything away if you haven't seen it, but we rewatched it a couple nights ago, and there were still moments that I was completely surprised by. As I mentioned, the production design is stunning. That's something to watch. The exteriors were mainly shot at Universal Studios, but it has two of the biggest movie stars in the last 50 years. It's directed by someone at the top of their game. And what's kind of an overall thing about it is it's a film that's conning someone in the story, while at the same time, it's conning us, the audience, because we think we're in on it and we're not at all.
Well said.
And it's so well done. So that's my choice.
I love that choice. Well, my final film for the 1970s is just one of my favorites. It's The Last Picture Show, 1971 by Peter Bogdonavich. What's to be said about this movie? It's this melancholy tone, this black and white photography. It beautifully captures the sadness that comes from living in a small, dying town. This resonated with me for the first time I ever saw it. The sense of time and place are so skillfully realized that I could almost feel the loneliness and the despair of these characters as their home and their legacy sort of dries up around them.
Yeah.
No other way to say it, really. But it's haunting. It's beautiful. It was a time when freeways were beginning to connect the country, but they were bypassing so many small towns and cutting them off from their lifelines that they were dying. I imagine that the town in The Last Picture Show might be one of those towns that was once thriving, but now it's not.
Right.
I think this is symbolic of life sometimes. We're so often at the mercy of arbitrary decisions, and I think this whole movie is about making choices with the hand you're dealt, deciding if moving ahead is worth leaving certain things behind.
Wow.
And I think that's what this movie is about. It was adapted from Larry McMurtry's 1961 novel, The Last Picture Show. It was directed by Peter Bogdanovich. They wrote the screenplay together. It's a story of the people in this small town, as I mentioned, Anarene, Texas, during the 1940s 1950s. It's also this coming-of-age story about sweet and shy Sonny Crawford, played by Timothy Bottoms in a stunning performance. Actually, he should have been Oscar nominated.
He should have been.
Yeah. And it's also about his more confident friend, Dwayne Jackson, played by Jeff Bridges. They were best friends since high school, and Sonny and Dwayne spend their days hanging out at the pool hall, which is owned by Sam the Lion, played by the great Ben Johnson. So great. And it's also the local diner, which is owned by Genevieve, played by Eileen Brennan. We just mentioned her from The Sting. Well, Sam and Genevieve are somewhat surrogate parents for all the kids in town. And also, Dwayne is dating J.C. Farrow, played by Sybil Shepherd, in her film debut. And she is the spoiled daughter of oil man Gene Farrow, played by Robert Glenn, and his bored, very attractive wife, Lois, played by Ellen Burstyn, who is having an affair with one of Gene's workers. So,
Nice.
a lot going on at home with JC. Well, in the movie, Sonny dates the trampy girl in town, Charlene Duggs, played by Sharon Taggart, in a very funny role. She's really good in this. But soon he breaks up with her because he's really in love with JC. Everybody's in love with JC
Yeah, of
because it's
course.
Sybil Shepherd,
Yeah.
the prime of her beauty.
Right.
Well, JC, she continues to manipulate every guy in town, and, she just loves to toy with the boys and get them all worked up. Any unfortunate boy who crosses her path, they're a victim. Well, Sonny also looks after Billy, played by Sam Bottoms, who is Timothy's real-life brother. And he's this young mute boy with mental problems who lives with Sam the Lion. Life changes for Sonny when his basketball coach, Coach Popper, played by Bill Thurman, asks him to drive his wife Ruth, played by the great Cloris Leachman, to a doctor's appointment. Pretty innocent, pretty innocuous, but Ruth is this lonely and depressed housewife, and she sort of takes comfort in Sonny's kindness to her. And they soon enter into this weird affair, kind of Harold and Maudish. They need something, and they each get it from the other person, which is kind of a beautiful thing to see. Dwayne ends up joining the army. Sonny takes over the pool hall after the death of Sam the Lion. And the town continues to die this quiet death. People continue to leave. The movie theater closes. The legacy of Sam the Lion seems to be blowing away in the dust. And Sonny and Dwayne are torn between a future somewhere beyond this small town, or do they try to restore the past and carry on the traditions held so dearly by Sam and the other people of the town? Well, along the way, they learn some painful life lessons about love, loneliness, family, jealousy. They know the torch has been passed on to them, and now it's up to them to keep the light burning or let it finally, once and for all, extinguish.
Wow.
Yeah, great movie.
Beautiful.
It was critical and box office bonanza. It made Bogdonavich the new director of the moment. It launched the careers of Bottoms and Shepherd and Bridges and Quaid. It won Oscars for Ben Johnson and Cloris Leachman. It also was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor Jeff Bridges, Best Supporting Actress Ellen Burstyn, Best Cinematography, Best Adapted Screenplay. Just a phenomenal, very important movie of the 1970s. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out.
Great choice. My last film is A Little Romance, 1979, again directed by George Roy Hill. Sorry, I chose two of his.
But what a great movie to choose. I love this movie.
It's a beautiful movie. This story is based on the book by Patrick Cauvin, screenplay by Alan Burns, who was a prolific television writer and created the TV series The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Lou Grant, and Rhoda, among others. He was nominated for an Academy Award for this screenplay, and the film actually won an Academy Award for Best Original Score by Georges Delarue. It's the story of a young American teenager, Lauren, played by Diane Lane, who's living in Paris with her self-absorbed actress mother, hilariously played by Sally Kellerman.
She's very funny.
And her wealthy businessman stepfather, played by Arthur Hiller. Lauren meets a movie-loving French boy, Daniel, by Thelonious Bernard, and the two bond over the philosopher Heidegger, strangely enough, and they ultimately fall in love. They encounter a charming older gentleman, Julius, played by Sir Laurence Olivier, who tells them that if a couple kisses under the Bridge of Sighs in Venice at sunset when the church bells ring, they will remain in love forever. So when Lauren finds out that her family is returning to the United States, she sets out on a quest with Danielle to get to Venice and reenact that tradition.
Get that kiss in.
Exactly. The film was created 6 years after George Roy Hill directed The Sting, 10 years after he directed Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and he cleverly incorporates clips from both of these films into this film. Other supporting actors in the film include David Dukes, who plays Sleazy with a capital S, film director. He's so good.
So good.
He's vying for the married Sally Kellerman's attention. Lauren's friend Natalie, played by the braces-wearing Ashby Semple, from what I could see, is the only film she ever appeared
And
in.
she's so funny.
She is hysterical.
She's so funny, yeah.
And for all us golden era classic film fans, Broderick Crawford is in this film. I had
Yes.
completely forgotten that in watching it again. He plays himself, and he has a very funny exchange about his film Sin Town with the film-loving Danielle. By the way, Broderick Crawford actually continued to act through the 80s up until his death in 1986, so he had a very, very long career. Laurence Olivier was 71 years old when he made this film, and he had just recovered from pneumonia and thrombosis. There's a scene where he has to ride a bike through town, and it looks pretty challenging. So the director had rigged up some kind of electronic bicycle for him to go, and he was like, nope, I am actually riding the bike. He insisted on riding that bike himself through the pivotal chase scene.
Those method actors.
I know, right? In the streets of Verona. This was the only film that young Thelonious Bernard made. After filming Wrapped, as a young kid, he told Diane Lane that he would rather be anything than an actor.
Wow.
Yes.
And he was so good,
He
too.
was so good, so good. It's Diane Lane's film debut, and in her portrayal of Lauren, you can absolutely see this masterful adult actress that she will become. She actually started on the stage when she was a young child in New York, appearing at the age of 6 at the famed La Mama Experimental Theater in Medea. And she later worked with Irene Worth, Meryl Streep, and Raul Julia in the Cherry Orchard at Lincoln Center in 1977. So she had a great background. She was discovered by George Roy Hill when he saw her in the original production of Runaways. Some would say that this film is sickeningly sweet. But Steve, you know, I like my movies
You like it
that
sweet.
make my teeth hurt. I just love those.
I don't think it's too sweet.
Well, and this film reminds me that when Lindsay and I were dating, we took a trip to Italy to go to a wedding of some friends of ours, and I thought he was going to ask me to marry him. And we were in Venice, and our friend said, "Are you two going to get in the gondola?" And I said, "Not unless he has an important question to ask me."
Oh.
And he never asked me the question.
So did you not take the gondola ride?
We did not take the gondola ride. But watching this film, it so perfectly captures that first love in the most idyllic of places, and how you have to fight for that love against all kinds of challenges, which is what we did. After he did not ask me, I continued to fight.
You nailed it down.
Right. And also in the secondary plot, it shows Arthur Hiller, who really plays super stepdad. He's really the most understanding and empathetic stepfather you could ever hope for.
I'm
And
real.
he's really fighting for the love of Sally Kellerman, so that the young folks teach him that.
I love how that storyline parallels.
It is. It is. It kind of ties in so beautifully. Toward the end of the film, Sir Olivier's character Julius says, "Something that two people who are in love create together against impossible odds can hold them together forever." And that's a mantra that I really would like to continue to always believe.
Oh, how beautiful.
Of course, there are so many other films. I mean, again, The Godfathers, 1 and 2, Chinatown.
And as you all know, The Poseidon Adventure is my favorite film.
The Poseidon Adventure.
But I've talked about it so much, I
We
decided
can't-
not to talk
can't
about it
that.
today.
But think about Jaws and Taxi Driver and
Coming Home and so many fantastic movies of the era. I mean, it was such a great era for movies.
Yeah. I think it's time for the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And the question was, in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it was originally intended for a certain actor back in 1962, but it took 13 years to develop. So by the time they were ready to go, he was a little too long in the tooth, so he didn't get the job.
Right.
Who was the actor?
Kirk Douglas.
Yes, it was the great Kirk Douglas, and as we all know, his son Michael Douglas produced One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was believed that Kirk Douglas loaned him the money to buy the rights to the book.
Yes. Wow.
So it would have been Kirk.
We are so happy that you spend this time with us. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast. And follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywood You can find us on Facebook and on Instagram, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube.
And we love your emails. Please keep them coming. Let us know what your favorite movies from the 1970s are. You can reach us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.
All right. That's a terrible start. We're going to start again.
All right.